We have a very special episode today as we are joined by UFC Featherweight Sodiq Yusuff as he explains his journey from the West African country of Nigeria all the way to the USA and now as a current UFC featherweight fighter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this man's amazing story. Sadiq Yusuff,
Hello.
nice to see you again.
I'm doing. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for sitting down with us today. And so, how did you start with your MMA career?
Man, it's been my dream since I was a kid. You know, since I was a kid, I've always told everybody I'm gonna fight in the UFC.
Yeah.
I remember I was just sitting at home and I flipped the channel.
Yeah.
I saw the Ultimate Fighter on TV, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, man, that's what I'm gonna do. I told my mom, I told everybody. I didn't know step 1 or 2 on how to get there, but it was always the main goal. I've just had it as like a fever dream until one day I heard Joe Rogan talking about wrestling, high school wrestling.
Yeah.
And me and my family, we grew up pretty poor here. We couldn't afford a lot of extracurricular stuff, but when he mentioned high school wrestling, that day I went to go check the school's AD. I was like, hey, do we have a wrestling team? And she was like, we actually do. There's only like 3 or 4 people on the team. And I tried to sign up that year, but at the point I was still a little bit of a knucklehead.
Yeah. So
So I didn't have the right grades. I needed a 2.0 or higher and no E's, which is easy now in hindsight. But but back then I didn't qualify. So I went on to the next year. I brought all my grades up and I started wrestling in my junior year of high school.
Yeah. So you said your family was poor. Originally, you're from Nigeria.
Nigeria. Yeah, so I'm originally from Nigeria, but when you come over here to the U.S., man, a lot of people don't realize that immigrant struggle. We was here for a long time with no documents, with no papers. So the type of jobs that my mom could find are like things under the table, you know, her just hustling. So a lot of things we couldn't really afford. We definitely couldn't afford no extracurricular activities, you know. So everything was just basically paying bills. And shout out to my mom. That's where I get my work ethic from. I could say no matter what, we was never homeless and we wasn't hungry, you know. So she made it work.
And how does that fit in terms of like your culture and your job? Because you are West African like myself here. And how does your parent take it that you're a fighter?
Yeah, to be honest, when I told her I wanted to do this, that was one of the biggest thing that I told her. I was like, man, at the end of the day, I'm your son. You know how I am. I get all my work ethic from you. You know, I'm gonna give it my all. And if I don't succeed at the end, it was just divine intervention that I didn't succeed. But you know, I'm gonna dedicate everything I got to it. And I always look at fighting as like, fighting is just struggling. You know, it's just struggling until you can find a way to win. Struggling at the gym, taking your losses, learning until you get to the point where now you can start imposing your will. You turn from being a good nail to being a good hammer. And that's why I try to spread that message amongst like the younger guys coming up now. Is like, you're not going to be a world beater, especially when you first started. If you are a world beater when you first started, you need to find a different gym, you know? Learn how to be a good nail first, and then one day you'll be a good hammer.
You were in a contender series.
Yes.
You had a brilliant fight, and that's how the UFC got you in.
Yes.
How was it like meeting Dana White and being in that situation?
Yeah, to be honest, I was so locked into what I was doing.
Yeah.
I always say it when I'm fighting, until my last maybe 2-3 fights in the UFC, everything was kind of always so like autopilot to where like I'm so locked into what I'm doing that I'm not focused on anything else.
Yeah.
So the whole contender series situation for me was just focused on doing getting to the fight, working on the moves that I've drilled in practice. So like I know I'm there, I know Dana's on the side, but to me I was just pretending as if it was just sparring, which is the approach I'd like to take to all of my fights. And with the contender series setup, it made it even easier because there was no crowd. It was quiet. You could hear your coaches. So it just turned into like, hey, we're just sparring at a different gym. So I wish I could give you a better answer on how it was like meeting him. But to be honest, it barely registered in my brain.
So you go through the contender series. You get signed by the UFC. You come into the UFC. You get an amazing knockout. And then you go through a series of time where you didn't fight.
Yes.
Was there a reason for that?
Yeah. The first layoff was because of the pandemic. I remember I couldn't fight because at the time when the pandemic started, they started shutting everything down. The UFC moved over to Abu Dhabi, I think.
Yes.
And they was having Fight Island. I was supposed to fight on that card, and then I found out my passport literally expired like a week before they got my fight.
Yeah.
And then to get a new passport, they told me the line was like maybe like 3 or 4 months long to renew your passport, unless if you could prove that it was life or death for you to make it to this country. And no matter how many things we tried to finagle, it didn't really happen. I couldn't get a fight for that much for the whole quarantine session. And after that, then I fought once, and then I actually caught COVID.
Yeah.
And that was like very, very bad. Like I caught it. I was one of the few long haul people.
Yeah.
And I remember when it was going on, this was early on during the pandemic, so people didn't really know what long haul COVID was.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was like a lack of motivation or something. I didn't know if I was being lazy, because I'll be chilling and sitting around, and next thing you know, my energy would just plummet to where I'll feel like, okay, I need to go take a nap. Like I'll be talking and exercising, and next thing you know, I need to go lay down on the side to go to sleep. And then sometimes I would just get random headaches, but the biggest thing was just the constant fatigue. And that was almost a 4-month battle to where there was no consistent training. Then after that, it hit my cardio. It went from me being able to run 10 miles to me having 2 minutes of real practice in me, you know? So it was pretty rough. It got to the point where I thought I was gonna have to retire. I remember I actually talked to my head coach about stopping fighting in general, because it went from, a lot of people don't know my history, but I've had 2 older brothers who passed away. So it went from me thinking about fighting as a career to like, okay, I need to actually not die, you know, like I don't want my mom losing another son. So I talked to my coach. I was like, man, we might have to, I think this is it for fighting. It's time for me to stop and focus on what's going on. But luckily for me, the team doctor at the gym works with an Olympic track runner, and she was telling him almost the exact same things I was, like word for word. Like she was feeling the exact same symptoms, the same, and like the time frame was almost the same. He was like, man, and they already found out that she was suffering from long haul COVID symptoms. So it was like, hey, you might be having the same issue. So then I started Googling stuff, and I was like, I didn't realize how common it was, especially amongst athletes. So because you would think like something like that, us athletes would be the ones who would be able to endure it the most, but it was very, very common amongst athletes. And lucky for me, I actually came back a lot faster than she did. Like I think she was still messed up until almost last year.
Dang, I'm sorry to hear that. After COVID, after a long hiatus, you came back, and if I'm correct, you have the 2nd fastest submission in featherweight history. That must have felt good. How was it?
Man, that felt amazing, because a lot of people see my striking, so they think I come from a striking background, but they don't realize I'm actually from a jiu-jitsu gym. And my coach, they always getting on me about I don't show my grappling at all. You know, there's a constant joke here that I have a C- grappling because there was some reporter that just put that out there one day. I was like, yeah, his grappling's like a C-. So every time we have new guests coming to the gym, so the same like, oh man, I didn't even know you could grapple, blah, blah, blah. So before that fight, actually, my coach was like, man, if he shows his neck, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And I was like, oh, I'm gonna jump. I'm gonna jump.
Gave him a few knees. You went in and guillotine. It was beautiful.
When I got it, I remember I turned to my coach. I was like, see, I told you I was gonna jump, man. I told you I was gonna jump.
And then after the victory, again, congratulations. It was a beautiful victory. You later on called out Korean Zombie.
Yes.
Would you still like to have that fight?
Yeah, I would love to have that fight, man, because I know at this point I need a name to kind of catapult me. I've been number 11 or number 12 for a long time. I keep alternating between those 2 rankings, and that's because a lot of my fights now, they've had me fight backwards 2 times in a row. You know, they had me fight number 15, and then they had me, I was gonna fight number 7, which was a good opportunity for me, but unfortunately he had to pull out. And so I went from fighting number 7 to fighting no rank at all. It was like almost all risk, no reward, you know. So I got both of those victories and kind of stayed in the same position. So a win over a Korean Zombie, I think is number 6.
Yes.
Or at least was number 6 back then.
Title.
Yeah. So that's a name that's big enough for me to move forward, and a rank that's good enough for me to move forward too.
And just a few steps back, you said at the time your passport expired. You just recently became American citizens.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So now that you're part of the American brand, you're Nigerian American, which side do you, I mean, I know which side.
Come on.
But which
you don't gotta ask a question,
it?
man. The best thing with me is that I've never lost connection to my roots. You
Oh,
know,
yes.
when we was at home, my mom literally banned us from speaking English. You know,
Oh.
which back then as a kid I didn't understand, but now that
Yeah.
I'm older, I really appreciate it because
Yeah.
I'm one of the few people my age that's been here this long that still speaks Yoruba fluently. You know,
Oh.
so it's one of those things that I'm happy that she did, and so I'll always rock with my culture. And once we got our papers right, we didn't even wait until we got citizenship. As soon as we became legal,
Yeah.
it was always constantly going back to
Going back
Nigeria
to
all the
Nigeria.
time.
Yes,
all the time.
of course. And then you also have a fella Nigerian who is now the former champion. Hopefully he regains the title.
Yes.
And then the other one, again, is also a former.
It's been a
I'm
rough
not
few
rubbing it
months.
in, my brothers. But do you have any connection with them?
Yeah,
Do you...
they've both been pretty cool. Usman has actually been like a lot of help even before we got to the UFC.
Yes.
I remember I don't think he was in the UFC yet either, but back then he was already pro. I think he was going to the Ultimate Fighter, or he just won the Ultimate Fighter, and we was all like in the same like message group.
Yeah.
So we all used to like support each other. He supported me through like when I was in the regionals, and Izzy, I didn't know him until I made my debut.
Yeah.
Like I knew of him, but he
you
didn't know
didn't,
me.
yeah.
You know, when I made my debut, I fought in Australia, and that was my first interaction with him. And he was like supporting me, and I remember the Australian guy was like, "Man, come on, you traitor, you blah blah." He's like, "Nah, I'm Nigerian first."
Yep.
And since then, he's always been good to me too. So both of them are guys that I really look up to. You know, they've always given me nothing but positive energy.
That's great to hear. Do you have any, last question, do you have any message for the obviously Black American friends and the Africans back home?
To be honest, the ones that are still coming up, I like for them to look at me the same way that I looked at guys like Rampage and Rashad and stuff like that. When I was coming up, it's like
Rampage,
seeing somebody that looked like me, the same skin color as me, doing something that I want to do in the future. I was like, man, at least now I know it's possible. And then when I saw Usman win the Ultimate Fighter, it's like now not only does he look like me, he's from the same place I'm from, you know. So like with me, I'm just a regular dude, man. You know, I came here to the gym when I was 19, and I just went all in, full focus, almost 9 hours of training every day until I got to my dreams. And to be honest, everybody out there could do the same thing, whether you're from PG County, Maryland, or you're from somewhere in the Hollywood Hills, you know. Everything I got through hard work, so you could do it too.
Thank you for the interview today. Hopefully I see you take the place of the Funk Master himself that holds the title. It's been an honor. And yeah,